Hey guys, thanks for joining us here for the captains meeting this year. We appreciate you guys taking part in this. It's obviously a lot easier with what happened this weekend with the weather and the snowfall. I think it's easier for everyone to just meet this way, so thanks for taking part. So we'll get right into it. All right, so here's a quick look at the agenda for today's meeting. Pretty similar to those in years past for returning captains. We're going to look at the divisional caps quickly, look at some roster limitations, some new rules and updates, which Leo Gervais will help me with, and then finally a quick look at the locations and nights that we have this season, some disciplinary issues, finances, playoffs, and miscellaneous, and then of course we'll open it up as promised for Q&A. So here we go. All right, so first things first, guys, team captains and the cap. As you know now, it's the second year, third season that we're working with the cap. It is the captain's responsibility to be aware of your respective division's cap. As you know, they're different for all 6 divisions, but it is your responsibility throughout the season. So if you are adding guys, make sure that you understand what you have to play with and what you don't. A lot of captains still ask me if I add this guy, I'm 2 points under the cap, and I add this guy, it works. But don't forget that when you remove someone, the actual incremental addition or subtraction may not be the true number that you're looking at. So make sure that you work with the registration link, or once it's up in a couple of days, the verification link, so that you can actually get the true cap hit for your team. One important thing to go over right away is the second point here. It's not about your full roster's cap value, it's a per game basis. So let's use the example of a Division 1 team. Their overall, or actually that's a bad example because there is no cap, so let's use a Division 2 team. If their full roster that you look at on their team page brings them above 515, that's okay. That doesn't mean they're violating anything. It's actually per game. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, especially for yourself, but also when you're looking at other teams' rosters in case you ever want to report some kind of issue or foul play. And finally, find out if guys are playing on other teams before you sign them up. It's your responsibility. Guys as team captains, most of you are very responsible, you're on the ball, but there's a lot of guys in FPF that don't really know what's going on, they don't know the rules, they just show up and play, they're at the field. Guys want to play more, obviously, so they get asked to play and they just say, sure, sign me up, but without knowing they're actually on another team in the same division or they're already on 3 teams. So it's your responsibility, guys, because unfortunately, if that does occur, where they're playing on your team and they've played on another team in the same division, your team will be credited to the forfeited loss, whether you were trying to cheat or not. So that's the important thing. It's your responsibility as captain. So we'll jump forward into the player ratings. So for anyone that's, I don't have to go through the whole process of how we went about it like we did last year, as far as, the multipliers and all that stuff per division. But what's important is how new players are rated. So a lot of guys are asking us, we're a Division 6 team, we're all brand new guys. How does it work? Some guys are better than others. We understand that, but since it's the first year, what we did is we took the divisional average from last year more or less, and we actually subtracted about 5 points. We brought those all to round numbers and basically went from 55 for Division 6 up to 60 for Division 5 and all the way up to 80 for Division 1. Now, of course, we understand that your whole team is not all skilled the exact same way, but for the first season, this is how it works. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to rate new players, so that will suffice for now. And ideally, what we have set up and what's being worked on and will be ready for the end of the winter season is an algorithm which will actually shift base ratings after each season. So this is cool because everybody has their base rating, but let's say a Division 1 quarterback goes out and has a season where he throws 25 interceptions, his rating will drop. It won't drop to a mid-70s if he started off in the 90s, but it will shift down maybe 3 or 4 points. So it's cool because you can actually keep track of how someone does, and if they have a good season, they're rewarded for it, and so on. So where did these numbers come from? In the first year, as many of you remember, when we started going into the winter 2014 season, we actually opened the door to players to vote. Unfortunately, that didn't go as well as we had hoped for a few reasons. One, we didn't get as large a turnout, and 2, some of the ratings were very skewed. We feel that some people who voted, although some did and did a really good job, some others didn't do such a good job, and they kind of just rated people to rate them. So we brought it back in-house. We worked with the FPF staff, and obviously we gave as an objective viewpoint as possible. And I think that the ratings we came up with are quite accurate. Of course, I'm sure there are a few people out there that are nodding their heads as they hear this, saying that's not true. But of course, we did our best, and it was quite an ordeal, as Alex, I'm sure, can back me up on this, to re-rate about 1,500 players from last year. Not easy.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. So moving on to the QB rating, which is something new onto the new website, which I'll get into the new site in a bit. What we've done is we've allowed players to ask for a second offensive rating. So, now I'll give you two examples. Let's say someone like Rajli Benablokader or Carmen Palice in Division 1, whose QB rating and receiver rating is very similar. So it doesn't really affect the cap that much. But if you take someone like, for instance, Kevin Wyeth, who is, I think a 99 rating as a quarterback, but as a receiver is in the mid-70s, obviously you see the big difference there. So what we've done is from Division 1 all the way down to Division 6, if guys are planning to play on two teams this year and throw on one and receive passes on the other, then we allowed you to actually ask for a second rating. So what this does, it gives you flexibilities, but it's very important that you understand your options, especially in a situation like the one I just mentioned about Kevin Wyeth as an example. If you are his Division 2 team and you fit under the rating with his 75 rating, make sure that he doesn't throw a pass, because as soon as he throws a pass, that 99 rating will jump on board and more than likely would put you over the cap, which in turn would lead you to forfeit the game. So it's very important as the captain to understand your options, even in game. So for instance, if your quarterback drops back from the half position, make sure he doesn't throw a pass, because it will cost you the game if it puts you over the cap. Very important.
Even extra points.
Even extra points, exactly. Thank you, Alex. So a quick note here on injured players. This has been an issue for us in past seasons where, guys, week 9, everybody will come out of the woodwork and say, I sprained my finger, I hurt my ankle. And as you can imagine, from an administrative position for the league, it's not really fun for us to be in a position where we're saying yes to some people and no to others. So we basically drawn a line in the sand, and we said that, oh, actually, you know what, I'm speaking ahead here. This isn't even what the slide says. But anyway, I'll cover that anyway, is that what we ask for is a medical note. If a player doesn't have a medical note saying, especially if he was operated, but even if he wasn't, unfortunately, it will not count, he will not be granted games played or playoff eligibility. Now, getting back to this slide, which, I went a little off track here, but just an important thing to remember, if you have an injured player, and he's getting a game played despite the fact that he's not actually playing, he will count against the cap. So you can't have it both ways. So an injured player who's getting a game played will count against the cap. All right, quickly here, roster limitations. So new multi-division rules. Guys are now re-permitted to play on 3 teams as they were in 2011 and earlier. We had it at a maximum of 2 for the last few seasons. As you can imagine, the scheduling for all the conflicts with multiple guys playing on 3 teams was not easy, but it's done. So we're happy that some guys are looking forward to playing on 3 teams this year. So that's new. Playoff eligibility, as you all know, it's 6 games. Game roster sheets I'm going to get into in a bit. We will need them for the first couple of weeks until we fully roll out the new application, which is going to be really fun, and I'll talk about that a little later. But it is 6 games in the winter season, as always, and 5 in the summer. Player releases. Another thing that's gotten out of hand in past seasons, the reason this rule was put in was for certain guys who, let's say, join a team and after 1 or 2 games they realize, you know what, I'm not really having fun with these guys, or vice versa, the team says, this guy's not really a good fit. To avoid having to have that person sit out the entire season, which isn't really fun, especially if they paid, we give them the opportunity to switch teams. And even if it's in the same division, if you're released, you can switch teams. So that's the actual goal of the rule. Over the years, people have started to use this release rule as like a rent-a-player, which isn't really fun for us, and that's not really the true spirit of the rule. So what we've done to mitigate that is we've actually added a February 25th deadline. So anything after February 25th, which is about week 6, if I'm not mistaken, or 7, players can no longer be released. And the second thing is, as always, a player can only be released once per season, because obviously there's no reason to be released twice, based on what I said earlier. Forfeited games, just a reminder that although our games are a 6-on-6 format, you are permitted to start the game and play the entire game with 5 players. Anything less than 5 at the start of the game will automatically, not forfeit the game automatically, but will start the running clock, as you all know, until halftime. And if you don't have a 5th player there, then you will lose by forfeit. Medical notes, as I mentioned earlier, only unoperated on players. I know I just contradicted myself, so that is true. It is only on operated players. So if someone is, sprained their ankle, for instance, and they have a medical note, unfortunately, we're still going to have to ask you to come to the field to get a game played. We want to try to avoid giving these kind of medical gray shirts, if you want to call it that. We want to try to keep that as little an amount of players as possible. So only if you've been operated. Otherwise, we ask that you do show up to the field to get your game played. Divisional limitations are no longer valid. This, for anyone who played last year, they understand this, and it's a walk in the park. We've already gone through it last year. But just to remind you, because there are still some teams that ask me about this, they say we have 2 D1 players playing in D3. Is that okay? Absolutely. This was the spirit of the cap being installed. There's actually no limit whatsoever. A Division 1 player can play in Division 6 if he chooses to. The only limitation is the cap itself. So before I hand off to Leo Gervais here, who's usually a bit more of an entertaining speaker than I am, so hold tight, I will introduce him. So he is our referee-in-chief. He'll be speaking about just some protocol with referees. He'll be talking about some of the new rules that we instituted through our rules committee, which Leo can talk about. A reminder that in FPF, we currently have a pool of about 30 officials, many of whom have CIS experience. There's even a handful or so that have some CFL experience. We think that the pool of referees that we have is quite good. But just like any other team out there, there are some more experienced guys, there's some less experienced guys. Our goal at FPF is always to attain as much uniformity as possible, meaning, the way one person calls your game in week 3 should be the same that someone calls at week 7. That said, we ask that players do understand that, our referees are human beings and certain people's thresholds will be higher than others, and what one referee deems an OC might not be what another person referee does. So we want you to, as team captain guys, and this is kind of something we speak about, and I mentioned here the liaison between the team and the referee. We've all played sports. I've played sports, and things can get heated, especially when the games start to really matter late in the season and the playoffs. But at the end of the day, it's important that the captain or someone else on the team maintain a cool head, and that be the person that's the liaison between the team and the official. For an official, it's extremely difficult to deal with 4 or 5 guys all in the heat of the moment, and it just makes this, for anybody who's refereed before or anyone who's, seen enough sports, it makes their job extremely difficult, not that it already isn't enough. So respect should be maintained both ways. And as far as FPF goes, it's important to myself as league president, but also to the other people on the staff, and especially for Leo as the referee-in-chief, that respect, be given to the players as well. Our goal is not to have referees who are out there and not open to discussion and to questions. It's important that respect be maintained from the referees to the players as well. But it's a two-way street. Remember that. And just like anybody else, if someone comes into your work and chews you out 3 days in a row, it's difficult for you to look at that person with a smile on your face when you see them the 4th day. So respect is an important word here at FPF, and we ask you to maintain that throughout the season. So without further ado here, I'm going to pass it off to Leo. You can maybe give a brief introduction about the Rules Committee too, and then you can go right into the rules.
Okay, good evening everybody. Thank you, Rob, for that kind introduction. The committee for the Rules Committee, as Rob called it, is comprised of referees and players. This year we had Tom Cesare was the Rules Committee chairman. Jason Leclerc and Walter Berry were the reps for the referees, and there was a multitude of players, and Rob was the deciding vote on the panel of 7. It never came to that deciding vote, and most of the rules were voted in almost always unanimously. Okay, so that's the basis of it. Okay, so I'm going to go through the rules. Some of them I won't read the whole thing to you. I'll just focus on the main point. Okay, the first one, 2.5, white flag belt must be visible at all times. This is just an upgrade of the rule that's been in the rule book for years. Just, and when we say the white flag belt must be visible at all times, a play is just being run, a guy's shirt is partially covering one side of the belt, and the ball gets thrown to the other side, and the guy that catches it, his flag belt is visible. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for someone trying to gain an advantage, and we can actually say that about all the rules. Every rule that's being voted on with the with the players okay, all these rules are meant to make the game better, and that's always the point. And it's always about who's getting an advantage and what should the penalty be. What should be the punitive measure if the rule isn't kept done properly. Okay, so that's that. 2.6, any undershirt must be tucked in. Same thing. And of course, it says here the officials can be preventative. So we want to make sure that the guys are just wearing the uniforms properly and leaving the flag, obviously unfettered, unclothed, so it can be grabbed for a flag guard. Okay, 3.2, The coin toss will take place with the visiting team's captain making the choice of heads or tails. This is the same thing as last year. The whole point of this was to avoid having someone not understanding what deferring the choice means. And so one team's going to have the ball in the first half, one team is going to have it in the second half. We just sort of avoided that. The addition was in the playoffs, there's no coin toss. The home team will have the first choice in the captain's meeting, both at the beginning of the game and in overtime. Okay, moving on. 3.9. Okay, talking about timeouts. The adjustment to the rule, or the addition to the rule, will be the clock will start on the snap after all team timeouts. Last year, it was only in the last 2 minutes, so the players, it might have been even Alex, I don't remember, mentioned that it was basically a little bit of loss of time, so we tried to find a way. We figured out and came to a consensus that one of the ways that we could have a little bit more time in the game would be to have that clock starting on the snap after all the team timeouts. Again, there's still two team timeouts per game, and my personal view of it has been that teams have usually taken the timeouts later in the game when they needed it. So I assume it'll probably be the same thing. So use those timeouts sparingly. There's also a technical timeout, which a lot of teams never use, but that's to ask for a clarification of a rule. But make sure it's a clarification of a rule. If you're going to pose a question or to complain about a call, that's not a technical timeout, and it's certainly within a referee's purview to give you an actual timeout if you keep delaying the game. Asking a question has nothing to do with the rule. Okay, it's never been done, but that is certainly within the referee's jurisdiction. Okay, so just use the timeouts properly, especially the technical timeout. Okay, 7.1. The ball is whistled in for each play. Let me see here. Oh, yeah. If Team A takes 2 consecutive pre-snap fouls, it will be required to put the ball in play or will forfeit possession at the point of last scrimmage. Basically, this rule is to make sure that people aren't abusing the time in the game, and just make sure that if you're taking a penalty, don't have 2 consecutive, because it is possible that you could give up the ball. Okay, so that's, of course, I guess, again, as Rob was saying before, the captains need to be aware of what's happening. Okay. 8.17, this is an addition. Okay, illegal deflag. Okay, removing a player's flag early shall be penalized unless it is done in a bona fide attempt to properly time deflag with a catch. Deflagging a team A player late in the offensive backfield, which is not the ball carrier, shall also be penalized. So what does this mean? Basically, you want to flag a guy once he's caught the ball or he's in the act of touching the ball. Okay, and the other point, the last sentence there means that if someone is in the backfield throwing a pass, let's say to a halfback, and you deflag the guy and he does not have the ball, he's nowhere near the ball, that could definitely be a penalty, because what we're talking about getting an advantage, the guy deflagging the guy when he doesn't have the ball is to make sure that when he gets the ball back, if he got the ball back, you could just tag him in, and obviously the play would be dead. So just be aware of that when these halfback option type things come up, and that's it. Okay, 12.4. Okay, this is a very major rule change. It was voted on. It wasn't a unanimous vote, but the vote went through, so we're going to see how it goes this year. I have to put that in there. I was the one that voted against the rule, but that's neither here nor there. There's many. I will tell you this: that the players actually pushed for this rule, and I can certainly, upon reflection, see the intelligence and the reasoning behind the rule. Okay. The old PI rule was 15 yards, then it became 10 yards. So basically, let's say it was the last play of the game and somebody ran by a guy, you would grab him, because the most you would get would be 10 yards. So the players made the excellent point that if you would change it to a spot foul, then of course there would probably be less of those kinds of fouls that I just described. So basically now PI will be a spot foul. So if you throw from your end zone and there's pass interference in the other end zone, the ball will be going to the 1 yard line or to the 5.5 if you so choose, as is always with all the penalties in the red zone. Okay, so that's a major change, guys. So that's something probably some people might want to ask about. But just remember, it's a spot foul. If it's less than 15 yards, basically it's the same rule as before. But the big change is when the ball gets thrown long down the field, you will definitely be giving up a lot of yards on defense if you grab somebody, hold it. And as we all saw yesterday in the Detroit Lions game, PI can be a very, shall we say, controversial call. Okay, so referees are doing their best out there, and sometimes it's the eye of the beholder, except for yesterday, it wasn't a call at all, as most of you know. No, I'm just kidding, guys. In all seriousness, watch out for the PI. Coach your guys. They have to play the ball. Okay, if you go through a guy and you're getting PI, obviously it's going to be a spot foul. That's a long penalty. So if you have questions about that, happy to answer it afterwards. Okay, the next big change was 15.6, objectionable conduct. OC and UR, basically the two, I'll come back to this rule in a second. The two big changes are you're going to be off for 5 plays instead of 3 plays. I'm going to come back to that afterwards. I just wanted to point that out first of all because I think that's the biggest part of the change for the OC and UR. But I'll get back to 15.6 here. There's no actual limitation to what could be an objectionable conduct. It's an act that basically is, as it says here, use of profane language, a gesture. An objectionable conduct is something that is non-physical, verbal, a taunt, using a hand, all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that has been added this year is directing the ball off the field in an objectionable manner. Deliberately delaying the game or contacting an official are also prohibited. Basically, if you take the ball, you kick it off the field in anger or in a way that either of the referees deems to be objectionable, you will definitely get flagged for that. So just, if you want my opinion, I would not kick the ball off the field, okay? Or I would punt it very gently, because if you do it in some kind of manner that seems to be like I said, objectionable or delaying the game, okay, it's certainly within the purview of a referee to flag that. So let's not go there. Just try not to kick the ball off the field. That's what I would tell you. Okay, the second part, 15.10, 5 plays off. So again, this is quite a few more plays off. This is 40%, if my math, or 66% more than 66.7%. Is that right, Alex? Okay, I'm not as quick as you, but okay, basically it's a major addition to the amount of plays that you're going to be off. Okay, and these plays also can carry over into a half or into overtime if that so happened in the playoffs. Okay, so 5 plays. Remember that. Okay, so when we had the referees meeting, we discussed about setting a standard and when referees would call it, etc. And basically, the consensus is we don't want to obviously throw anybody out of the game. And when you get 2, you're obviously out of the game. Or you're sending out somebody for 5 plays. That's a pretty major penalty. So my only word to the guys was, make it count, make sure that it's deserved, and when it's deserved, you flag it. So it's really up to the captains to control their players, and when the referees are having a problem with a player, I've directed them to talk to the captains and, let's keep those lines of communication open. Let's try to be fair. Are there going to be moments, when people don't like calls? 100%. Are there going to be moments when maybe a referee, is going to give a penalty and someone doesn't like it and he's going to vent? Absolutely. But we have to find a way to speak with the captain, speak with the referees, and make sure that we try to avoid the guy going off for 5 plays. But if it does happen, let's learn to live with it, and we'll move on from there. Okay? And that's it for the plays. The last thing I wanted to say was, look at it this way, guys. You have to remember that the football game is like an ocean, okay? And you guys are the ships on the ocean. And the referees are kind of like the clouds overseeing what's happening on the ocean. Okay? And there's going to be storms, right? There's going to be interaction between the clouds and the ocean. Okay? But after the storm passes, okay, the clouds are still probably going to be around, or they're going to come back, and the boats are always going to be there as well on the ocean. So we all are all in this together. You can't have a football game, even a flag football game, without referees. Okay? That would be called recess. So let's work with the referees, we'll work with the players, and have a great season, guys.
Thanks, Leo. So another captain's meeting and another reference to the ocean from Leo Gervin. It's becoming one of our traditions here.
If anyone has questions about any of the rules, you can type them into the chat panel under the question section at any point in time, and we'll get back to you at the end of the presentation for answering any questions you have.
Thanks, Alex. All right, Leo, so thanks for going over some of those rule changes. Obviously, if anybody has questions, we can go over them, but as you can imagine, it was a long discussion at the rules meeting between the players and the referees, and I think one of the main reasons we've set this thing up in the last few years is because the referees see the game from one perspective, the players see it from another. It's nice to kind of have that discussion and open both sides' eyes a little more to the other, basically the other party's viewpoint, and I think that, obviously as the years pass, there's less and less major changes because, we've put in some good work over the last few years. But every year there seems to be 1 or 2 little changes that people seem to embrace, and that hopefully improves the flow of the game and makes everybody's experience better. So now that we move forward to a few league-mandated rules, just quickly. So these are rules that weren't necessarily voted on. They were just rules that myself and the staff decided upon that we thought just makes things a lot easier. So the first thing is the bib-style jersey. So I'm sure some of you guys have seen it. You know, a guy is playing with a cotton T-shirt. It tears, which often is the case with cotton T-shirts. Now, if it's a short jersey, that's okay. That's fine. The big issue that we have is if there's absolutely no connection between the back of the shirt and the front on either side. So it's just basically, it's as if you're throwing a bib right over yourself. And a lot of people have complained over the years that it's unsanitary, it's unhygienic. And, you know, frankly, guys don't want to be grabbing other guys' sweat and armpits and all that stuff, as you guys can all agree with me, I'm sure. So just that being said, important that we let you know that those types of jerseys will not be permitted. So if your jersey does tear completely on the side, you'll be asked to switch it. Taped on numbers, this is something that we've gone over ad nauseum year after year. Guys, if you know, one of the things that makes FPF so great is the fact that we do keep track of the statistics. We do keep track of, you know, player progression, all this stuff, but with that comes the fact that you have to wear a jersey number. Now, I've played in some other leagues outdoors or elsewhere where it's not really necessary, and that's totally fine, but in this league it's very important that you wear a number on the back of your jersey. And if you tape on a number, that doesn't work because it just makes the scorekeeper's life that much more difficult. What's important, and we're going to have some in our equipment bag, but I strongly suggest, and I'll talk about that a little later, keep a felt marker in your bag. You have nothing to lose. If a guy has, you know, a white t-shirt and there's no number, well, at least, you know, you can clearly mark it on in the back, so at least he has a number for a temporary basis. But please, guys, we ask that you don't use these types of jerseys all season long. We know that each week you have a different scorekeeper, different refs, and you could probably get through half the season without seeing the same person twice, and you can say, yeah, it's just for this week, but, you know, we just ask, we're not forcing teams to wear, all sublimated jerseys or NFL-style jerseys. I think we're pretty reasonable when it comes to that, but we ask that you, you know, just go out and get yourself a regular jersey with a regular number, and everybody's happy. One switch that we made, away teams will always wear the pennies. I'm sure some people are chuckling hearing this because it's always the point of contention. This is something, it's, mea culpa on this 100%. When we started the league in 2005, don't ask me why the home team was asked to wear the pennies. I guess from youth hockey back in the day, that's kind of how it worked. Don't ask, but anyway, that's kind of how it always was, so we just kind of stuck with it, even though it didn't really make sense. So now finally we've said, okay, we're going to shift. So the away team will always wear the pennies, both in the regular season and in the playoffs. It will always be the away team from this point forward. Live Strong and vinyl bracelets. In years past, some of the referees had asked guys to remove those like Live Strong style, like plastic bracelets, considering it jewelry. Although we do think that it's not the safest thing in the world to play with them because it could lead to some finger injuries or whatever. Realistically, it's kind of a 1 in 1,000 situation. I don't think it's the end of the world. It's probably more of a headache than anything else. So we've decided to allow the wearing of those types of bracelets, and they will not be penalized. Wedding bands as well, same thing for guys that are married. That will be me soon, so I feel you guys. I feel your pain. It's coming up. But the wedding bands that you wear, you could keep on your finger. Just make sure that you tape it up. So similar like you do with your earring, we ask that you do the same thing. So just tape it up to kind of limit some of the shock that comes with if someone knocks a joint directly on your band. Second to last point, knee braces. We've had some contention with this over the last few seasons as well. Some of the referees kept the rules. Some were a bit more lenient. We had a long discussion about it. Personally, my viewpoint is guys who are wearing knee braces are not trying to gain an advantage. They're not trying to hurt anyone out there. It's something that obviously no one wants to do, but we're obliged to if that's the case. We do ask that you please tape up your brace with some kind of adhesive tape or wear a sock over it. It's safer for everyone involved, and we would appreciate it, but it's no longer a rule. So if you have a knee brace, especially since a lot of the new braces are kind of like much lighter, it's a lighter material, and it's just all around safer, it's not going to be obliged or forced upon you anymore. And finally, the double forfeit rule. This actually hasn't happened, I think, in a few years, but just so it's stated and it's clear, rather than being 0-0, because points against is the #1 tiebreak, over point differential, double forfeit will be treated as a 30-30 two-way loss. Again, not something that happens very often at all, but it should be said. Next up, just to go over the locations and nights quickly, guys. So as I mentioned in my email a couple of days ago, I really appreciate everyone's flexibility. I know it's frustrating for teams to have games moved up until a couple of days ago, especially for week 1. I try not to move any locations or nights because it's so close by. It's only like 7 or so days away. We still moved a few games for weeks 4 and onwards. We're going to finalize the schedule as of this week. but I appreciate everyone's flexibility. But just so you see the breakdown here, because a lot of teams put in requests and they said, can you only give me Sunday games or can you only give me Tuesday games? And as you can see in the number in the brackets there, guys, this is how many games we offer each night. So obviously we're trying to boost up the number of games we offer during the week, and that's something that we're looking at as we move forward year after year. Same thing with Sundays because they're so popular. But as of right now, the most available night is Saturdays by far. So it's appreciated when teams are open to playing on Saturdays because we have so much accessibility. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night we have games in St. Leonard. As you notice, we only have one game at 7:30 on Wednesday nights. Most of our games are 9:30 or later on weeknights. So for those teams who did request weeknights, it is normal that you do have mostly late games, unfortunately. It's just the nature of the schedule that we have available to us. For teams that requested more games on weekends and you prefer earlier games, then we were more likely to convene you because of the fact that we have games starting at 6 both nights. So this is a breakdown of the games we have. There are 80 games played each week. So Leo, our head referee, we appreciate the job you do. It's not easy assigning 160-man games per week, but somebody's got to do it. So good job with that, Leo. So that's the breakdown. Discipline. Okay, so to go over this quickly, basically, guys, and reading that first line may come off a little harsh, eliminating problem players, but I think it should be noted that in FPF, the fact that we have, this year we'll have over 2,500 members participating. I could probably count on two hands how many guys are giving us repeat issues. As the league grows and as we're trying more and more to evolve into as well run a league as possible, it's important to us to basically, for lack of a better term, get rid of guys who are giving us problems. This is not what we want. I mean, a lot of people play in FPF and they put their kind of their heart and soul on the line when they're playing, and there's intensity and there's passion, and that's totally fine. And sometimes guys cross the line, and that's understandable. It's going to happen in sports. It's the guys that do it on a weekly basis. And we want kind of people to see this as a lot of people enjoy playing in this league. They look forward to playing their game every week. But it's a privilege to play in any league, especially in a league like ours. And to be perfectly honest with you, we don't want the guys that are causing problems every week because they ruin the environment and the experience for everybody else. So if you have someone like that that's on your team, it's partially falls on your shoulders. Even though it's not your child, it's not your you're not the person's parent, but if you're willing to take a person on your team that has been a problem for us, it's important that you do your job and you do your best, even though it may be difficult at times, to keep that person under control, because this is not something that we want going forward, and more we're trying to kind of weed those bad apples out. The disciplinary committee, which is something we started 4 years ago, for every suspension that's handed out, guys, you have to understand that it's always difficult because this isn't the court of law, and people want to appeal their suspension at times and so on. And we try to be as fair as possible, and I'm working on an actual document which is going to make things a little clearer. Like, for instance, if you throw a punch, you get X many games, and if you're a second-time offender, it automatically jumps up by 1 or 2 games. So at least it's a little more black and white. But overall, the disciplinary committee has done a really good job. Ed Shoshan's been our chairman since it started. And realistically, guys, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, we have 80 games per week being played. So that's actually exactly 800 games in the regular season. And as you guys know, there are some times where things happen on the field, shoves are exchanged or whatever, but for the most part, and I see as many games as anybody else over the course of the season, there are very few large altercations in FPF, and I think that's a big credit to the players, because we have a good group of guys, and we don't necessarily are made up of goons or guys that are looking for trouble. I think it's a big compliment to the referees who do a good job controlling the game, and it's also kudos to the disciplinary committee, because they've shown over time that, and I'm the one who kind of instills this in them, that we'd rather you kind of err on the side of being more strict and more lenient, because this is not, FPF works very hard to make sure that we don't come off and that we don't give off the vibe of being a garage league, because that's not what we are, and that's not what we strive to be. So that's how the that is what the disciplinary committee purpose is, and that's it. It'll be the same thing this season, but like I said, I'll be sending out a document in the coming weeks to kind of break down and give people a better idea of what to expect should something happen. Suspensions, of course, as always, are in weeks and not in games, so guys playing on 3 teams, unfortunately, and we do have that OC and UR counter, which I'm going to get to here in a second, an accumulation of 4 individually. So let's say 4 OCs or 4 URs over the course of the 10-game regular season, or a combination of 6, so essentially 3 and 3, will warrant you a 1-week suspension. Now remember, if you're playing on 3 teams, your odds of hitting that are tripled, right? So that's your responsibility. Unfortunately, some guys have told me in the past, well, I'm playing on 2 teams. To me, no one should get to 4 OCs or 4 URs over the course of the season. These are major penalties. But if you're on 3 teams or on 2 teams, it's your responsibility to make sure that you know and understand that all these URs and OCs and penalties are combined all together. So just so we know, suspensions are in weeks. 1-week suspension. If you play on 3 teams, unfortunately, you're going to have to sit out 3 games. Continued emphasis in 2015. So this is very similar to the slide we had last year. And it's important for the referees to know, and we had our referee meeting, as Leo alluded to a little earlier. We had that about a month ago. And it's, as you can imagine, with 30 referees, everybody, has different viewpoints and sees things differently. And as far as physicality and trash talking goes, everybody has a different threshold, as I mentioned earlier. So coming from FPF, coming from the top, we want to filter down certain, I guess emphases are the best way of putting it, but also, culture changes is a term I like to use. So physicality is something that we want to try to get out of FPF more and more. So it's tough for the referees because on some ends, people will say you're calling the game too tight, and on other ends, people, for the same play, people will complain that, hey, you're basically you're letting too much go. So it's difficult for them. We try to, find that perfect kind of middle ground, but as we know, that doesn't really exist because it's all judgment and it's all subjective. So what we've laid down here is groundwork for lowered physicality, which essentially the 2 main things, guys, are lowering the head as a ball carrier. So when a guy is running with the ball, and we went over some game of the week footage from last year at the captain's meeting, and we kind of broke down what we thought was a penalty and what we thought wasn't. And oftentimes what it came down to is guys losing control of their body. Well, unfortunately, as the ball carrier, it's your responsibility to maintain control of your body. And you see that in some of the higher divisions, although maybe the play is a little more physical, the guys do a really good job of controlling their body, whereas in some of the lower divisions, you see it a little more often. So it's very important, guys, to keep in mind that when you're running with the ball, you shouldn't lower your head like a running back in tackle football and try to drive through defenders. That will be a penalty, and that's what we hope to be called more and more, and we're trying to get that through to the officials. But of course, as I mentioned, it is subjective, and it is kind of difficult for everyone to call the exact same way. Using the body to slow progress is another example. So to give you guys an example, if a guy's running with the ball, I'm going to deflag him and I stick out my thigh, which is used pretty commonly, or I use my whole body to pretty much just stop his progress, and then I pull his flag. The goal of the discussion that we had with the officials is that at the end of the day, it's flag football, and the way to stop a ball carrier is to deflag him by pulling off his flag, not by slowing him down with your body and then removing the flag, or as Alex mentions, or pushing him out of bounds. So these are things, of course, that we want to continue to put emphasis on going forward. Excessive trash talking, guys, I get a kick out of out of rivalries and out of some fun back and forth banter as much as anybody else. But I think a line has to be drawn somewhere. And we've had examples of guys using racial slurs, homophobic slurs, and then saying, well, it's my buddy on the other team. We know each other. They tell the ref. But then by halftime, like, they have to be split apart. So unfortunately, referees can't understand the complexity of each opponent's relationship, and if they're buddies, if they went to school together or not. So unfortunately, they have to see this as black and white. And excessive trash talking where they feel like derogatory comments are being used will be flagged, because that's not something we want in FPF. Pockets and jewelry, same old, same old. You guys know this. We go through it every season. Take this advice. Bring an extra pair of shorts each week if you're the team captain. If a guy's missing his shorts because he has shorts with pockets or whatever, it's a lot easier than running around the complex and trying to find someone to lend you a pair of shorts. Jewelry, same thing. Chains, earrings, necklaces. It's dangerous, guys. It's dangerous for you to be wearing them, and it's dangerous for the opponent. If you show up to the field with jewelry, make sure you take it off before your game, or it will be called an OC. And think about it, guys, and we discussed this with Leo. If a guy is wearing a chain during the game, the referee can't say this year, well, it's 5 plays, so I'm not going to call it. It still has to be treated the same way. So imagine you'll be asked to sit off for 5 plays for wearing a chain. So it's very important that as a captain, you're on top of this, and you make sure your guys take their jewelry off prior to the game. Okay, now finances. I've gone through this every season with the captains. This year, the team fee is $1,950, which is $1,435 plus tax, which brings you to $1,650. And as you know, we add the $300 for the referees. The final payment is due January 25th. For anyone who's dealt with me, and I've probably been accused of being too nice for this many times, I've never collected a late fee because I understand that playing in the league is expensive enough. It's a lot of the guys playing in the league are younger guys, students. I know it's not easy to accumulate that money, all in one shot and pay it off, at around Christmas time. So I understand and I empathize with players, but at the same time, I respect and appreciate when players, and especially team captains, are cooperative and make things easier for the administrative side of FPF. So what we're looking to do, because we threaten with late fees every season, and it's not really something I personally like to do. So what we've decided to do is for future seasons, if you are a repeat offender of someone who's been paying late, because it tends to be often the same teams, we're going to have to ask you for an upfront payment in the next season, which would be in the summer, or if you decide to come back in the winter, which obviously I know is not easy to do as a captain, but that's the only way that I feel is fair to make sure that it's not the same teams taking advantage of my flexibility year in, year out. So I hope that you can, understand that, and hopefully you can appreciate the fact that late fees will not be charged, and hopefully everyone, makes the experience as easy as possible for everyone involved. And I mentioned it a little later, but I'll mention, since we're talking about finances now, as team captain, guys, I strongly encourage you to get people to pay up ahead of time. It makes your life easier as team captain. Sometimes, and I understand that, you take a guy on the team, he's a good player, he plays 4 or 5 games, decides he's not really happy with his role, and he bails, and then it falls on your lap. The responsibility is then yours, and, maybe yourself and some of the other guys on the team, and that's not fair. So, unfortunately, I can't force teams or captains to run a team a certain way. Everybody's kind of like their own little separate enterprise. But if you can take my advice, I strongly suggest that you collect people's money ahead of the season. And I play sports myself, guys, and my personal way of looking at it is, listen, you may be a good player, but you're not good enough to play for free. If you want to play on the team, you have to pay like everyone else. And that should be everyone's philosophy, because I'm sure, a lot of people who are running teams and that are captains have been burned, and that's not fair. It's not fair to you guys. You guys are important to us. You're the guys who put everything together, so we're trying to look out for you. So even though it seems like it's a bit of a tough task to collect from everyone ahead of time, I strongly advise you do so. But in the end, it's your call. So that's basically what I was speaking about here for the last couple of minutes. As captain, you shouldn't be fronting money for your players. And then the last point there is FPF only deals with team captains for collections. It happens every season where some guys will say, look, Rob, one of my players is a bit late for his payment. Do you mind if he deals with you directly? And for me, as you can imagine, already dealing with 160 teams this season, it's enough work. So having to deal with 20 or 30 individual players on the side of that just makes things a little more difficult and a little more tedious. So I'd really appreciate it if some guys do ask you that you let them know that I prefer that they deal directly with you and that I deal with you as the liaison. All right, so blackout dates. Some people have been emailing us about week 11. They say, what the heck is week 11? Are we playing 11 games this year? Did you forget something? Is it a typo? So just to clarify that, unfortunately this year we were given a few blackouts by the complexes. So January 24th, if you'll notice as you look through the calendar, there are no games in Lachine. There's a blackout. The Catalonia Soccerplex needed the complex for a major soccer tournament, international tournament that weekend, so unfortunately we were blacked out. So what we did is we took all those games that were going to be played on the 24th, moved them to March 21st, same thing, at Lachine Saturday night. The January 24th is a Saturday. But as you'll see here, I mentioned the divisions of each day. And the reason we did this, guys, is because there's makeup dates on January 24th, February 1st, which is Super Bowl weekend, or Super Bowl Sunday, and then February 21st in Brossard, which is the same thing, where there's a blackout date. But at risk of, let's say, example, we take a team, so let's say Les Udistes had a game January 24th, which was rescheduled to March 21st. Had a game in the next week, February 1st, which was pushed back to March 22nd, and you get the drift, of course, on February 21st as well, same thing. It would be a problem because they'd be stuck with 3 games on the same week, which obviously wouldn't work for anybody. So what we did is we stuck one specific division in each of those makeup dates. So that's why some teams said, well, I requested, no weeknight games, but unfortunately for that March 23rd or 25th, you have no other choice because that's all the 5 games are being played on those days. So that basically answers the Week 11 issue. For Division 2 and Division 6, they're not affected by it in any way. So you'll see that your games are scheduled from Week 1 to Week 10 as per usual. Playoffs. So this is always a fun part here, looking at the 6 divisions. So for D1, 6 out of 8 teams make it. Obviously the ratio is a lot higher, but the fact that it's a smaller division and the fact that we do want teams to move up to D1 and we want to try to make it worth their while. So that is why so many of the teams, or 75% of the teams, actually get into the playoffs. The number 1 seed on both sides gets a bye, much like the CFL format, and the crossover is in effect. So if you finish 4th in Conference A, but you actually have a better record than the 3rd place in Conference B, you will cross over. Then you see for all the rest of the divisions, Division 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You'll notice the amount of qualifying teams. For 4 and 5, just a quick note, there's 24 teams from each division. That means 12 teams per conference. So how it works is the top 4 teams get a bye, which leaves the bottom 8 per conference, which play each other, 4 winners, and then they meet the top 4 teams. So that's actually 5 playoff rounds for Division 4 and 5. The playoffs will begin on March 28th and 29th, and the finals, as usual, run all the way until mid-April. The playoff schedule will actually be posted on the site very soon, as we did last year, so you can get the exact dates as soon as possible.
And Rob, on the case of Division 4 and 5, it's the leaders, basically the winner of your subdivision that actually gets the buys, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Good point, Alex. So that's the automatic, just like you do in the NFL, where, example, Carolina Panthers, for those NFL fans who got a home game despite the fact that they had a losing record. It's kind of a similar process with us. If you win your subdivision, you will automatically get one of the top 4 seeds. And finally, as you see in red here, why doesn't everyone make the playoffs? So, there are other leagues in other sports and also in football which allow all teams to get into the playoffs. For us, it's something that we've always kind of run this way, and we feel that, for guys who play in tournaments, for instance, it's kind of a win and you're in. It's every game matters. Well, for a regular season as long as ours, which is 10 games and goes, covered basically the whole winter or the whole summer in the spring season, it's important that each game matters. We don't want guys to basically, not really care or kind of wing it all season and go, 3-7 and it doesn't matter, we're in the playoffs and now our big guns show up and we win the championship. I've seen it in other sports. It puts a bad taste in my mouth. You're paying to play a full regular season, so we want every week to count. And by setting these guidelines, which we usually try to keep it at 50 or 60% of the teams per division getting in, we think that it really adds to the regular season, and it makes the race start from week 1. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that.
And most schedules as well, their divisional games are set at the end, so you still have the chance to catch up and steal that first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, as we're wrapping up here, only a few slides left. Media coverage. So as everyone knows in FPF, this is something that kind of sets us apart from other recreational leagues out there. We really do our best, and we really put a lot of emphasis and a lot of attention on trying to add a little extra. How can I say this? A little extra value proposition, pizzazz, as Leo says here, to the actual experience of playing in FPF. So, like we did last year, we are going to offer live streaming webcasts, which are also downloadable afterwards. And they will be on Thursday evening. So all the podcasts will take place on Thursdays. We actually don't have FPF games on Thursday nights, so it works well. Also, this season, you'll note that or you should note that the weeks start on Saturdays. So every week starts Saturday and ends on Wednesday. So Thursday seems like a great fit to kind of recap the week that was and previewing the week that will be. Weekly articles, same thing. We have someone writing for week 1 for D1 and D2, which is Vince Nardone. For those familiar with him, he wrote D3 last year. D3 will be Paulo Della Rocca. D4, GM Caletharis. D5 is Roger Amica. And Division 6 is Brent Botkin. So we think that all the guys putting articles out there will be quite good, quite entertaining, and will only add to the experience. On the French side of things, we have Mathieu Domont, Simon Dagenet, and Nicolas Belot also adding articles on the French side. So hopefully most of you are bilingual and you can actually take advantage and read 2 articles on your respective division. The game of the week will be back. Ryan Aridi, who does a really good job filming the games, editing them up and posting them up so quickly as he's developed a reputation for. He'll be back this year, so we'll do the same thing, voting each week on a specific division, and the most votes gets their game filmed and posted online. And finally, the fantasy draft. If Eagle's up for it, because he's kind of the man with the plan, the guy behind the draft, calculating all the numbers. But we started doing this a few years ago. Paulo Della Rocca, Alex, they were kind of the guys who spearheaded this movement, and it was really fun. A lot of the guys got a kick out of it. Both the media guys were drafting players, and the guys were being drafted themselves.
And those that got snubbed.
And those who got snubbed, of course. Yeah, nothing adds to the experience like a chip on your shoulder. So we're looking to do this for all divisions this year. I think it'll be really fun. So keep an eye on that. They usually do the draft around week 3 or week 4. So moving on. So one of the last things I wanted to discuss was the new website for FPF. So obviously everyone has seen it, and we hope that you like it. The goal is to improve the user experience as we move forward. So suggestions, feedback, we're totally open to it. The more we add to the site, we feel like the better feedback we've been getting. But of course, there are some bugs still prevalent, and there are some things that we can still add to the site. So we're always open to your feedback, guys. That's how we obviously improve, the product that we can put out to you. So we hope you like it. There's still some stuff more. There's still some more stuff to come. Case in point, the Hall of Fame section, the record book, the trophy case. There's going to be some really fun stuff coming up. So we hope that you like it, and it'll only get better with time. New scorekeeping app. Alex and I actually had a podcast speaking about this a few weeks ago at the Uncle Hood Studios. So we still need a couple more weeks just to test it out before we fully roll it out into full use. But we really, really are excited for this. We think that it's going to be. Oh, you're showing it off. Cool. So we think that it's really going to add to the experience for the scorekeepers. It's going to make their life a whole lot easier. For the captains, you won't have to worry about handing in a paper, and it will also do the calculations for you as far as your cap. So if you want to add a guy right before the game, it will automatically tell you, look, you're over the cap or you're not. So we think it's really, really cool. We're really excited about it. De Facto Media built this for us, just like Enviva Media built the website. They both have done a great job. So we're really happy, and we're excited to roll that out. So hopefully by week 3, it'll be fully integrated into our operations. But I think for the first couple of weeks, we'll still go the paper and pen route, and make sure that we don't lose any stats for anybody's game. Faster delivery is something that's also a key attribute to that. So stats should be up even quicker than they usually are. And actually, accuracy is also something I want to mention, because oftentimes people will write to us and say, our scorekeeper messed up, he missed this stat or he missed this touchdown. But it was actually oftentimes the error occurred in the data entry side. So by removing that middle layer, I think that the stats overall will be a lot more accurate. And finally, miscellaneous. So just a few quick things to remember, guys. Week 1, we ask you to please submit your player contracts. A lot of teams have gotten lazy with this over the last few years, but it's very important that you print these out as captain. Just have the guys fill it out quickly and sign it. It's very easy for them to do. If you're playing again in the summer or even in the fall, should we have a fall season, you don't have to fill it out again. It's a once-a-year thing, so we ask that you please take care of it week 1 of the winter season. Team and individual photos. Ryan Aridi posted to our Facebook page yesterday, I believe, letting everyone know that he will be taking some pictures week 1 as well. Ideally, we'd like to retake everyone's individual photos this year. Some guys, still have their pictures up from 2009, and they've either put on weight or lost hair. Or put on hair. So I think we're due for an update, and Ryan is ready for the task. So keep an eye out for him in week 1 and week 2, and try to please arrive to your game and get the guys ready a little earlier than usual in week 2, so that it makes the process a bit easier. Reminder of game roster cards. So like I wrote here, temporary. Like I said, week 3, ideally we'll have the new app out and running. But for the first few weeks, we ask that you please make it easy on the scorekeeper. Go see them. Jot it down on a piece of paper. Any piece of paper is fine. I'll send out the game roster cards anyway by email, but even if you write it down on a loose leaf paper or anything, it's fine. But just please make the scorekeeper's job as easy as possible. Pennies, as I mentioned earlier, the road team is in charge, or not in charge, but is responsible for wearing it, should the teams have the same colored jerseys. Jersey requirements with numbers. So it's important that you have a number on the back of your jersey. And please, guys, try not to switch. Me personally, I'm a guy who always wears number 11. I must have maybe 10 or 15 number 11 jerseys, either black or white. Most of the guys playing in this league are athletes who usually tend to wear the same number. I'm sure you can dig up, 2 or 3 in the same color and be fine for the season, guys. It's extremely difficult for us when a guy switches numbers every time he plays. It's really it creates a lot of issues for us. So we'd really appreciate it if you keep the same number.
No tape, right?
Yeah, no tape is something I mentioned as well earlier on. Alcohol on the sidelines. Some complexes are a little more strict than others, but overall, guys, we appreciate that you try to keep alcohol off the sidelines. And referees do hold the right to ask you to leave the field if you're being belligerent, if you're causing problems, either when it's your game or if you're sticking around watching another. And finally, last thing, schedule changes during the season. Very complicated for me to do and to accommodate. I understand that teams, obviously, things change over the course of 10 weeks and guys become unavailable, but I really appreciate the fact that guys don't ask me for a schedule change unless it's really, 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 really important. Like last year, a guy was getting married and he forgot to tell me before the season, so his whole team was going to be there, so we switched up the game. But otherwise, I ask that you please hold off the requests. I think that we took care of that before the season as best we could. And the forfeit threat, I put it here, and a lot of teams like to use that, guys, and teams understand that FPF doesn't like forfeits. We don't want games to end up in a forfeit. It's not fun for anyone, and players know that, and they tend to take advantage of it. So oftentimes what I will get is, listen, Rob, please change the game because otherwise we're going to have to forfeit. When in reality, and sometimes it's the case, but oftentimes it's, hey, our best player can't make it. Let's try to contact Rob and see if the game can be moved. So I ask guys that you please be flexible. You please be cooperative. It's not easy, moving games around. Teams don't realize that 4 teams need to accept the switch, which is usually 40+ players. So it's not an easy goal on my end. So unless it's really, really necessary, I ask that you please hold off. Last 2 things here: social media, Facebook, Twitter. We're pretty active on social media, but at the same time, we ask that anything that's FPF related or that's on an FPF page or FPF, social media page of any sort, that you please keep it classy, for lack of a better term. Posts where the N-word is dropped, or homophobic slurs are mentioned, or racial. I've seen a lot of stuff over the years that kind of makes me stop and think, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I mean, this is 2015. You wouldn't speak like this at school. You wouldn't speak like this at work. We ask that, if you're going to post stuff like that, keep it on your own page and not on ours. And if people really become excessive, we do hold the right to actually hold disciplinary action against someone for something that they post on our wall. So please post responsibly.
Let me just add one point.
Yeah.
We also have something, the referee advocate, and George and Jason will be doing it this year.
George Ladder.
Yeah, George Ladder and Jason Leclerc. George did it last year, as I mentioned. Basically, if you have a rule question and it's something, I'm not talking like, in one specific game, like I got flagged for this, why did I get flagged? I'm talking about, can you clarify pass interference? What happens, is this, what can be deemed as an objectionable conduct when it's after the game? Those kinds of things. So, we're looking to keep a good line of communication with you guys and to clarify things. So that will also be on the Facebook page, et cetera, et cetera. If you have questions, you can send them to the league, and we're happy to try to give you more clarity on some of those rules.
Thanks, Leo. So basically that sums it up. My last point here is we create as professional environment as possible. Everyone loves that aspect of FPF. It's very serious. We run it extremely, we run it, pretty strict, and our regulations are pretty tight, but that's all to make sure that, guys don't see this as a garage league. This is a competitive league. But at the end of the day, you're playing for fun, guys. People are paying to play. We want to offer you the best product possible, but at the end of the day, keep in mind that this is a recreational league, and that, passion is good, but there's a line not to be crossed, and we ask that you always be aware of that line. So that wraps up our presentation, guys. I appreciate you sitting through my monotonous, boring tone here. So Alex will open it up. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, so I'll go through the questions that are currently in the chat panel. Some I've already typed the answers to, but we'll answer them for everyone. If you do have any more questions, you can type them in the chat panel, and if ever you need a clarification on it, type back and we'll answer. Worst case, we'll unmute you and we can have a conversation. So our first question relates to adding new players to a team. So there's a question about what rating they get depending on their division. So you had mentioned there's an average. What's the value they get depending on your division?
Yeah, so good question. If you're a brand new player, ideally no one in FPF this year will have a 0 rating. If we see a 0 rating, we'll simply update it to the division average or the division base rating. So what it is just like you saw on the registration page when you added a new member, it's 55 for Division 6, 60 for Division 5, 65 for Division 4, 70 for Division 3, 75 for Division 2, and 80 for Division 1. If you add a guy at the field and we add him on our own, don't worry. If he doesn't have a rating, we'll go in and add it. Or if you're kind enough, you can send us an email as a reminder saying, player X doesn't have a rating. Can you please give him the base rating?
Yeah, just keep in mind you don't add players that accidentally put you over cap at the field.
Yeah.
Because that way you would actually go over.
Yeah.
Okay. We have another one about the rules themselves. So are the rules going to be posted online?
Yeah, so well, actually, the Winter 2015 rulebook is up on the site in both English and in French. Jason Leclerc was here with us in the room, and Roxanne Wally were kind enough to help us with the translations. So if you actually go on the FPF site, which here, Alex, I will.
Yep,
Give me one sec, guys. So if I open up the Flight Plus website, so at the very top here, you'll see information, rules, and you'll see that both the English and French documents are available for download. So that's where you would find the rule books.
Great. We have another question. This is actually a rule clarification for Rule 7.1. This is the forfeiting after consecutive delay of game penalties.
Okay.
So can you elaborate on it? Does it mean that 2 consecutive delay of game penalties will now result in a turnover? You actually need 3, correct? Could you elaborate?
Yeah, it's Jay, right? It's 2 or 3.
It's on the third.
It's on the third.
We said that if Team A receives 2 consecutive for delay of game penalties or other pre-snap fouls, they will be in the obligation to snap the ball, otherwise maybe threaten to lose possession.
Yes, on the third
so
one.
on the third one, you could lose possession.
Yeah, I think the point of this, guys, is that at the end of the game, technically there was a loophole in the rules. We've never really seen it because it would be extremely unsportsmanlike. But let's say you're trying to milk the clock. Essentially, you can have your play clock run out on 3, 4, 5 consecutive plays, which obviously would work against the team who's trailing in the game. So the point of this rule is that two straight penalties prior to the snap of the ball will result in.
Well, you need to get the ball into play in the third play.
Yeah. Let's say you take a time count, and then the ball gets put back 5 yards, and then you take a procedure or false start or an offside. The next play, you have to put the ball into play because basically you're trying to milk the clock. That was the objective of the rule, and that was the decision of the rules committee.
It's never really been seen, right?
Never happened. In I don't know how many games that is, Rob.
Yeah.
Thousands of games in Flight Plus football.
Now that we brought it up, I'm sure people.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't start worrying about it until like the last 2 minutes of a close game.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant. If you have a rusty team in week 1 on the first series of the game, don't worry about that.
Yeah. We're looking so people don't gain any advantage.
By the way, that extra voice you're speaking is Jason Leclerc, who's going to be helping us out with the French.
The man.
They can't see you.
No, they can't see you. He's waving, but they can't see you. All right, so next up.
All right, we have another question. What happened to the rule regarding the snapper setting the ball? There was some debate on Facebook regarding that when released. Even the ref that commented had a different understanding of the rule.
Go ahead.
I could talk about that.
Do you want them to see you?
No, they don't need to. They don't need to see. I haven't shaved in weeks. Listen, there is a standards and interpretation document that Tom Cesare wrote.
Which we will share on the site.
Which will eventually be shared. It's just not ready for distribution yet. But in that document, we do talk about that specific item, and I can read you what it says at this point. Basically, it says the center is allowed to set the football. Once set, the center shall not simulate the snap of the ball. Any motion to set the football is acceptable. Some centers put the ball through their legs. Others simply place the ball down and wiggle it. Any movement to set up is allowed. Should the center, after having set the ball, simulate the snap or double clutch the snap, the play will be whistled dead for illegal procedure. Now the point of this whole discussion here is the refs are either going to judge it legal or illegal. And if we judge it illegal, the play is over. There's no concept of the defense being allowed to leave early if the center moves the ball. If he moves the ball and we consider it deceptive or giving the offense an advantage, we're going to blow it dead for illegal procedure.
Just remember, guys, if the guy's flinching with the ball or he moves the ball has to physically be lifted off the ground. So if he just, as Tom rightfully put in the standards document, which you'll be able to see, if the guy's just moving the ball a little bit or he sets it or he puts it down a certain way, that is not a snap. It's got to be a simulation of a snap to draw somebody offside. So the golden rule for the rusher is don't leave until the ball is actually snapped. Don't listen to the cadence and don't look for a wiggle.
I know some of the other guys have seen different interpretations of this rule in other football experiences. In FPF, it is not permitted to deflag the center prior to the snap under the pretense that the center has moved the ball illegally.
Perfect. All right, well answered, guys. I appreciate it. So let's move on to the
Let me
next
get
question.
you another question here. Yep. So, is it the team's responsibility to always have pinnings in the case where they are needed?
Absolutely not. Well, how it works, good question. There was probably a new team that asked it.
Yes.
So how it works is that at each complex we have a set of pennies. So if you're playing a team that has the same colored shirts as you and you're the road team, you will be asked to go grab the set of pennies and put them on. Now it does happen because we usually have 2 sets per field. It will happen, and it's happened, maybe 3-4 times over the course of the last few years, where all 3 fields, for instance, have like a black on black game, or navy blue on navy blue, or white on white, which obviously causes a big issue, or it's like penny Armageddon, as I like to call it. So basically, as it stands right now, you are not responsible for your own jerseys. What a lot of teams do, though, however, is that they actually buy 2 sets of jerseys. One, let's say, like a nicer jersey, and then they may just have, white. Like let's say they have any colored jersey besides white. They may actually have a set of white T-shirts with their matching number in the back. Very simple, like a $5 jersey, but just so they never have to wear the pennies.
Or you can get your own pennies too.
Or you can get your own pennies too. But to answer your question, you are not responsible to have your own pennies. No, you're only responsible to have 1 set of uniforms.
And keep in mind, there's also the pictures of the teams on the website,
Very
right?
good point.
So you can figure out if you're wearing the same color and if you're away, and at that point, put on the jersey that you need, or know that you're going to have to change jersey.
Yeah.
So delay of game 2, make sure you go get it from the scorekeeper and don't wait for the game to start and then go.
Sounds good. Good point, Alex. Good question.
All right. We have another one. I missed the part about tape numbers. Can you recap?
Okay, well, basically, guys, we've been saying this over and over. My goal as president of the league, I guess for lack of a better term, is that I want guys to play football. We're not here to start, kicking guys off the field because they don't have certain, uniform requirements. But for this one, it's very simple. And the referees ask me, Rob, do we uphold this rule or do we not? And it's difficult because I've actually gone against my word a few times, and the referees get upset with me, which I don't blame them. Jason and Leo are waving their arms right now as we speak. But all we ask you guys is get jerseys with numbers, or if you don't have, let's say your jersey is torn the week before, or it happens that you forget it, come see the scorekeeper or see if your captain has one, and we're going to have to unfortunately write your number down with a thick felt marker, and that'll be the way to do it. Because unfortunately, taped jerseys, guys, the tape always falls off. You sweat, you perspirate, and the tape comes off. So it's important to make sure you have a jersey with a number. That's the only thing we ask of you as far as uniform requirements. We ask that you please respect it.
Great. So we have another question. Can teams play each other twice in the season?
Yes, in Division 1, you play the teams in your own conference twice. If it happens in another division, it's a typo. So if that's the case, please let me know. It is possible that when we entered the games, there may have been a typo, but otherwise, no, you shouldn't be playing the same team twice in any division other than Division 1. That, of course, doesn't include playoffs. There's obviously the possibility of having a rematch from a regular season game.
Okay. Who's writing articles for D3 this year? I think you mentioned that.
D3 in English is Paulo de la Roca, or Piz de la Riz, as he likes to refer to himself. And on the French side, I believe Division 3 will be
Go on.
It's Nicolas Belot, who's going to be writing about D3 and D6 and a bit of Division 1 and 2 as well.
We have a question about substitutions on the field.
Just to add to that, sorry, Alex, but Nick Belot he score kept for us last year at Loyola, but he's a new writer for us, but he has experience writing for Versus Quebec, so he comes with a pretty good pedigree.
Where am I? When can substitutions be made? So basically, when a player can get off the field, another player can replace them. So it's between whistles, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay. Well, substitution. Yeah. Basically, what happens is the whistle's blown, and you have 20 seconds to snap the ball. Now, before the ball snapped, you could make a substitution, but the team's going to be responsible to make sure that you don't have too many players on there. So anytime the whistle is blown, that means the ball can be put into play. So, if a team's in a hurry of offense, it's going to be very difficult to substitute as it would be in a regular football game, in a tackle football game. However, so I would just, take a look at the way that the team is playing, do they huddle or not, and be ready to make substitutions or not very quickly, because anytime the ball is put, like once the flags are moved, balls, the teams take care of the ball. But once the flag's removed and the referees are in position, the whistle will be blown. So I would say try to substitute before the whistle is blown if you're not really sure.
Perfect. We have a question for Division 5 about the seeding, the buys.
Okay.
So there's only 6 subdivisions, 3 per conference.
Yeah.
So the 4th one goes to the wild card, right? The best next
The
best
highest, exactly. Good question. It would go to the best wild card team in the conference.
Okay. We have a question. If a player on a team cannot make it, are we allowed to invite someone to play for one game even if they are not on the roster?
Absolutely. So again, that must be coming from a new team. So the way we do it at FPF, and as strict as we are for some rules, I think we're pretty understanding and flexible for others. I've actually shown up to a soccer game. I'm not a soccer player by any means, but I've shown up to a game, driven half an hour, and been told by the league that I have to be on a roster 48 hours before. Obviously, I wasn't happy about it. At FPF, you're allowed to add a guy up until right before your game. The only issues are if he does play in the league, make sure he's not on another team in your division, and make sure he's not already on 3 teams, because he can be on a 4th.
And over cap for you guys.
And over the cap, exactly. But otherwise, if you want to bring a friend, you're stuck one game, and you want to bring someone, there's absolutely no problem. You just give the scorekeeper his full name before the game, and you have him sign a player contract and submit that. So often people will ask about the player contract. I have a guy, but he's only starting with us week 5. Do I have to give his player contract week 1? The answer is no. Only when a player comes in to play his first game are his player contracts required, and you can submit those to either myself at the field or to your scorekeeper.
Speaking of which, we have a question. If we played last season, do we need to resubmit player contracts?
Unfortunately, yes. It works per year. So if you ask me this question in the summer, I would say no if you played in the winter. But our insurance policy goes per year. So unfortunately, yes, you do have to refill it.
Question about the roster cards. Are they going to be on the new site?
Yeah, they're going to be on the site. I'm also going to email them to you. Or actually, no, you know what? I'm not going to put them on the site because we're going to roll out the new app pretty soon. So I'll email them out to captains probably tomorrow. But realistically, guys, you don't even have to break your heads to print these out. You have enough stuff to print. You can really just tear up like two loose leaf pieces of paper, break those up into 4 even pieces, and you're basically good for the whole season. And that's not even including the fact that probably by week 3 or week 4 you won't need them anymore.
Great. Can any wide receivers be in motion? And also, what's the minimum amount of players allowed to be on the line of scrimmage when the ball is snapped? I will preface this by saying I typed in the chat panel that there's no wide receivers in motion. Technically, someone corrected me. That's not true.
Yeah.
You can have one person laterally or backwards. So
Yeah.
I'll let the ref answer that.
Okay, so you can have one player in motion at the time of the snap, laterally or backwards, other than the quarterback. So that means, first of all, no forward motion at all. Before the ball is snapped, you can have more than one, just like they do in the NFL, but all of those, except for the one who's still going to be in motion at the time of the snap, have to pause for a full second before the snap. And as I said, the QB cannot be moving forward in order to
You
create.
can move laterally.
QB can be creating laterally on a rolling snap or
Yeah.
backwards if you
Yeah.
want to simulate a long snap
Yeah.
going over his head or something crazy like that.
Again, how many pictures?
And on the line, it's 3 players on the line, including the center, and you don't have to have one on either side. It's 3 players on the line.
Awesome, man. So
You
they
have to be
could
able to-
run in quads, right, Jay, is what you're saying? So you could have 4 receivers on one side, the snapper,
Yep.
and then a quarterback. You don't actually have to have a receiver on both sides of the snapper.
And just one point about the on the line. On the line means you should be on the line or within a yard of it. And a few years ago, we made the decision to be pretty liberal on that. Now, we don't want somebody in the backfield, but if you're within a yard of the line of scrimmage, or you put your hand up and say, I'm onside, you're basically going to be onside because in this league, it's supposedly no contact, so you can't chuck somebody at the line anyway. So it doesn't make a difference if you're press coverage or so-called press coverage. You can't jam a guy off the line, so it doesn't matter if the guy's actually right on the line or not. That's the reason for the change in that.
Yeah, so we say on the line, within a yard, hand up, close enough. We're not going to flag you for being off the line if it's close. And one last note, the 3 guys that are on the line, the 2 other than the snapper have to be at least 2 yards away from the snapper.
Yeah.
So you can't line up your guys right on the snapper and get
Full
the rusher's
60.
pass.
And the other thing is that if you're not sure if you're on the line or not, you can always look at the referee that's on the line of scrimmage, the head referee, and he's usually, especially in the lower divisions, we try to help guys, especially at the beginning of the season, say get on the line, you got to move up, et cetera, et cetera.
Great, thanks, guys. All right, next up.
So we have one. Let's say a player that is added only plays defense the whole game, does not get on the field for offense. Does this player's offensive rating affect the cap?
Very good question. That's actually a question that's asked to us very often. And the answer to it is, unfortunately, because of the fact that there are so many games going on in FPF at once, it would be impossible for us to manage or keep an eye on each game and its in-game activity. So unfortunately, whether you have 12 guys on your roster, for instance, you have 12 guys on your roster, 6 only play offense, 6 only play defense. It doesn't matter if one of your defensive players is in your top 6 for offensive rating, he will count against your offensive cap. So great question. I actually forgot to go over that. It's an important point, but that doesn't matter. Anything that happens in the game as far as cap doesn't matter except for quarterbacking. So if a guy throws a pass, then it automatically takes his higher rating should he have a higher QB rating than a receiver.
We have a clarification on the rule book. According to the rule book, you can go for 3 points from 15 yards. Is this a typo? That's only
yeah. So that's I'm not sure. I'll have to review the rule book to make sure it's clearly written. But what that is actually is in the playoffs we actually have overtime games, not in the regular season. Regular season end of regulation. If you're tied, it's a tie game. But in the playoffs, we actually have like a shootout. So 3 converts where you can go for 1 point from the 5, 2 from the 10. And as you read, 3 from the 15.
Quick little clarification about the pausing momentarily before the snap. So just can you go through the mechanics of that? If you're moving, for example, from a trip to a balanced or a balanced to a trip, whatever, backfield, laterally, just the whole concept behind it, just to explain it.
And basically, you have to be basically immobile for 1 second before the snap. And that, of course, is the referee's judgment. So let's say you have 3 guys on one side and the center. So let's say those 3 guys want to flop to the other side. Well, they can run through the backfield, get to the other side, and then they would count 1 Mississippi, and then the ball could be snapped. So you basically can't be moving when the ball is snapped unless only one person can be going laterally or backwards. And that will be the judgment of the official on the line of scrimmage, which is the head referee.
Perfect. Thanks, Leo.
2 more. What happens if a player throws the football but doesn't have a quarterback rating? So, for example, a halfback for their cap.
Yeah. No, good question. So basically, how it works is if a guy doesn't have a second rating, offensive rating, then we treat it as if it's 1. So it can't change anything, right? Like if my rating is 70 and I throw a pass, it can't change anything because I don't have a second rating. So that is strictly for the guys who have asked for a second rating. Of course, no one asks for a second rating to be higher. Most of the guys that are emailing us are asking us for a lower rating because they're not, for instance, as good at receiver as they are at QB or vice versa. So if they, during a game, actually take on the role where they're stronger at, then they're gaining an advantage that they shouldn't be able to gain in a lower division because they're not actually counting against the cap as a quarterback or as a receiver. One thing I want to mention, and I'll put this on the site, is that even as in a reverse idea where the guy has a higher receiver rating. So, for instance, I'll use Robbie Robinson as an example. He's a quarterback in Division 3, and he's usually a receiver in a higher division. So, if he actually catches a pass in Division 3, then just like if it was a quarterback the other way around, his higher rating would kick in, which is his receiver rating. The only exception to that rule is if it's a reception on a pass that he's thrown himself. How does that happen? Usually it's if the rusher deflects the pass, it comes back into his hands, and he runs it. We wouldn't oblige the person to, purposely drop the pass, so he would be allowed to do it because that wasn't drawn up that way. But otherwise, if anybody else would throw this player in particular, so in this case Robbie, a pass, his receiver rating would fully take effect, which is, in his case, the higher one.
Okay. We have a question. Is there any rule change with a rusher interfering on the snap or rusher purposely causing an interference on the rusher or anything like that?
It's funny, actually. At our referees meeting, and we use a lot of film and video footage to kind of break down some stuff, and it was good to get all the referees to kind of discuss calls all together. And we did catch a few times in the course of the season where rushers actually initiated the contact, right? It's a little crafty move to say, 99% of the time it's the snapper initiating the contact, but there are some rushers who initiate it. It's a tough call for the referee to make, especially in the regular season with 2 refs on the field. But if they do catch it, then absolutely they would penalize the rusher and not the snapper. As far as new rules go, though, there is no new rules. So for new teams, you should know the rusher should be in a rushing zone, so he can't rush directly in front of the snapper. And only one rusher can gain immunity from the snapper. So should there be 2 guys rushing on a play, only one gets protection, and they can find out who that rusher is by asking before the play.
Or is default on the left side of the defense.
Okay, or by default on the left side of the defense. I didn't even know that, so it's good to know.
And last question, a little bit humorous. What constitutes excessive celebration, and how is it going to be judged?
Who's that? No, look, guys, it's a recreational league. You know, you score a touchdown, you want to have fun. Like I said, unfortunately, not all our referees, view things the exact same way. Just like all players on every team are different, so some may be stricter than others. I would hope that the referees, could kind of take things tongue in cheek and have a little fun. If a guy is, jumping in the air and chest bumping his teammate, it's a passionate game. Guys show their emotion. The thing that we don't want to see, guys, is, and I've seen it myself, is a team is up by, even if they're not up big, but especially in a case where a team is up by 20, 30 points, it's late in the game, they score a touchdown. We've all been on the losing side of one of those games. It's not fun. It's a shot at your ego. It's a shot at your pride. To have a guy kind of borderline taunt you with a celebration, that just leads to excessive stuff that we don't want in the league. So I think everybody's smart enough to understand, the borderline between, taunting and just having a little fun with their buddies. There are some stuff we put in place, like no spiking of the football, and anything like that. But for the most,
no Dougies.
Yeah, but for the most part, we're pretty, it's not like the NFL where, any choreographed celebration is automatically flagged. I don't think we're that excessive, but I think, we pretty much try to do a good job to avoid altercations before they happen.
That's all I got here. That's it. If that's it, we got some good job guys coming in. So, Rob, Thanks so much for your time. Leo, Jason, everyone on the call, thank you for joining. Hopefully this was more enjoyable than driving in -20 to Loyola campus and fighting for parking with the snow clearing guys. If you want to join in again for the French one in 5 minutes to listen to Rob struggle in French, be my guest. Go ahead and sign up for that one. And have a great 2015 season.
Thanks, guys. Well said, Alex. So we'll speak to you guys soon. And as always, if there's any other questions that you want to follow up with, you can email me at robert@flyplusfootball.com. If there's something you want to ask to the referees directly, you can always contact Leo or Jason Leclerc via Facebook. They're pretty accessible. Otherwise, you can email me and I can forward them any email. So that's pretty much it, guys. Have a great week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on the field for week 1. Have a great season.